Hey guys, what's going on? Jim the Alley. Remnant 2 only coming out in 5 days if you've pre-ordered the super duper stupid expensive edition, which this guy has gone and done. So I've only got 5 days to get this video recorded and edited. This is going to be a fun one. I thought Remnant 1 would be a fun thing to try and play through and see what it's like with a little challenge I've set to myself to see how far I can go, how many bosses I can do with just being melee only assuming this game was intended to be the Souls-like shooter that I'm still waiting for, because Remnant 1 doesn't quite scratch that itch for me, and I'll get into that in the video. But without further ado, let's just get into the game. So, I'll hold my hands up. For lore reasons, I'm not going to try and cover the story as in depth as I normally try and do. I just don't understand it, really. I feel like a lot of it was hidden in text, and if you know me, I struggle with reading, so me reading blocks of text just isn't going to happen. But I will try and skim over the general basics of what I understood. So from what I could understand, you travel to this island because you want to get to one side of the island but end up on the other side. This brings you to Ward 13 as you nearly die. From there, you'll just learn about the characters. Your key characters are some random guy that sells you items. The head honcho woman who runs the ward, which is Ward 13. And then the two people that you're going to constantly be speaking to is the old man that upgrades and sells weapon and armor, and the person you trade boss weapons to. Like, you trade in the items you get from bosses for boss weapons and abilities and whatnot, and that's generally the basis of everything that happens at the beginning of the game. But they're gonna be your main two vocal people throughout the game will be those two, because they're the only two people you go back to speak to ever. From there, you'll fucking turn on the reactor, get Ward 13 up and kicking, and then the head honcho woman will be like, you gotta use the crystal, get out, it's the only safe way to leave this facility. Bada bing, bada boom, the game can now start. From here, every playthrough will start the same. If you go on for the campaign, you'll start at Earth, right into the original founder, the head honcho's woman's father, lab place, his home base, if you will, which has a load of notes and stuff and items. I could have gotten SMG early, I completely forgot you can use his keycard to do that, but I digress on that. There's also a secret armor that I just missed as well. I feel like there's a lot of secrets I missed in this game. But again, I will take that as I go. So from there, we actually get to play the game. The game is fine. It's not as smooth or as clean as I remember it being. Definitely has some jank to it, but nothing that would make me turn the game off in any way, shape, or form. Melee combat is a bit clunky, but then again, like I said, the game's not made for melee. It's an option within a game made for shooting, kind of like ranged combat in Dark Souls can be clunky, and especially in the earlier ones, because the game's not made to be as a bow or crossbow build. It's supposed to be balls to the wall melee combat. So I let it slide on the melee stuff. The guns feel fine, they act fine, the enemy design is perfectly fine, everything's decent, and I think that's my my key thing. The game's fine. There's nothing wrong with the game. The game is fine. It has its problems, don't get me wrong, but the game is fine overall, so I'm not gonna harp on anything being fine or anything. As long as the game is fine, I'm always happy, because I've played some stinkers in my time, and I'm perfectly happy with fine being the baseline for a game. But this does bring up one big problem I do have with the game while you're going through Earth. So the game was sold as a procedurally generating world. Every year, forever changing, no playthrough is the same. In my personal opinion, not enough changes for the game to feel new every time. The routing and the progression through these areas, even in adventure mode, feels too similar. The layout never changes enough that I feel like I'm playing a different game every time. I always feel like I'm playing the same exact route. Maybe there's a bit of a fucking roadblock or something, the road is cracked, and that's about it. It doesn't change enough, in my personal opinion, to be calling it procedurally generated. The sewers, literally, one of my pet peeves with this game, the sewers was the biggest example from this. Once you get through the first layer of the world, which is the upper part, the streets, you'll go into the sewers. This is where you'll find your first boss. We'll get to him in a minute. But once you're in these sewers, it is just the same shit. Nothing fucking changes no matter how many times I play this place. Nothing, it never feels different. It's the same layout every single time. And then when you do get to the boss, it can just add stairs to it. It's the worst kind of procedurally generating, where the boss run can get shorter or longer depending what the game feels like throwing in. But then, like, literally, one of those goes, I was playing with my friend. If I have the footage for it, I will put it on. Playing with my friend, and we went into the adventure mode because we're playing on, like, the second hardest difficulty from the get-go, so it's really difficult, and we're like, we need to get some gear going. So we jump in adventure mode, we get to the boss in here, and it adds 2 flights of stairs to get to the boss. Why, man? But then, like, there's nothing good with this. Like, I never feel like there's a new area for me to go to explore, or something that I haven't seen before. That shit's all located in extra areas added into the underground, or dungeons and stuff. I just don't feel like the procedurally generated world is there. It just feels like it's missing something to, like, completely change it up each playthrough. I don't know how else to explain it, and I'm hoping number 2 kind of addresses this problem. And if this is just a me problem, then, you know, I'll hold my hands up and be like, well, shit, this is just a me thing, I guess. I'm sorry. But overall, that is probably my biggest complaint with the game, is that the procedurally generated world just does not feel like it's generating enough to make it feel different enough for me to want to run back and keep grinding these areas to try and get the thing to spawn so I can get the secondary weapons and stuff. Because that's another thing with the procedurally generated world. You got to constantly play these areas back to get weapons and traits that you didn't get on your first playthrough, which again is fine if it feels like it's different every time. But if it doesn't, and I run the world 4 times to try and get one dungeon to spawn, for it to not spawn, you get bored and irritated very fucking quickly about that. But yeah, I don't know if that's just a me thing or not, or whatever, but there you go. So, there is another problem coming up. Out of the frying pan into the kitchen. Once we get through this negative, I don't really have any more negative takes on the game, and we can just go positively into it. So, from here, once you go through the sewers, you'll get to the boss fight, which presents the next big problem this game has. And it's not just game's fault. Every game like this has some sort of problem like this. There's a problem when it's a Souls-like, because bosses are one of the key highlights of a Souls game. And the problem is, there's an ammo problem. My guns only have so much ammo, and if I miss too many shots, or my gun isn't strong enough to kill it on one rotation, I'm out of ammo. How do I kill it? I could go melee, but if I have no perks in that, or, to be honest, the dodging is a bit weird, so there's a good chance you'll just get hit and die. And 3, I bought a gun game to use guns, so what is their answer to this? To spawn ads. Every boss has ads or some way to replenish ammo in that capacity. There's like a handful of bosses that don't require ads, instead of had like chests and crystals you can destroy to get ammo instead, which I don't know why they couldn't have done that for every boss, but I digress in that nature. It's just a problem, because Souls games are known and stand and die on boss fights. It's like their key thing. Build your character, get it strong, kill the bosses. The biggest things you always remember in Souls games are the boss fights that you went through the areas to get to. And this game kind of like tarnishes that, where cool boss fights are kind of like hampered by the fact that I've got to clear ads while trying to fight the boss and stuff. So I only played on the normal difficulty just so I could, you know, beat the game before the second one came out. I won't be doing that for the second one, but I just wanted to get a video out there, and it's a good thing I did, because I would have finished later and I wouldn't have got this video out in time, so thank the Lords I made that decision. But I don't know, it just ruins some bosses for me, that like the ads are there just being an annoying nuisance and taking away from the coolness. Because this boss, he's designed cool, he has some cool moves, some cool dodging mechanics and stuff. He's a nice first boss that gets you right into the rhythm of the game, and then he spawns explodey fuckers that just ruin everything for rhythm-wise, just because I need ammo or I can't kill him. It kind of does show a problem when why a Souls-like shooter is a struggle to make. I don't know how Immortal Unchained does it. That's the other Souls-like shooter that I'm going to have to look at some point. But yeah, it is a big problem now. 90% of the bosses have ads, and the ads kind of throw a wrench into the pacing of a boss fight. But that's the last negative I'm going to throw like a big chunk of time to. Let's just actually talk about the boss. So from my understanding, there's two bosses you can get. It's either the guy with the bow or this guy. This guy is pretty fun. He's got some easily timed dodges on attacks once you get used to the dodging. And overall, it's just a fun fight. Even with the ads, I did enjoy the fight. There's not really much to say. He is basic in nature. He is just a big guy with big sword and will swing it, and when you get too much distance on him, will start charging at you and will not start charging until he gets close to you and swings a sword upwards. The only biggest problem is trying to time your dodges against the ads and him, because the ads, once the ads start coming, you want to try and make distance with him instinctually, but once you start making distance with him, he starts charging, and then if you try and dodge while he's charging and then there's an explodey guy there, you're just going to take damage, and if you're on the harder difficulties, that could be a one-shot in theory. So there's got things you got to look out for. Except from that, the boss goes down without really much of a problem, and we can just move on to exploring the upper world once again. I know I said I wasn't going to rant again, and I'm not. I've just got one small complaint. More of a, I hope they do this in the sequel kind of discussion. When you're just roaming around, I'll have it on screen. When you're just roaming around the open world, it's kind of open. There's, you know, pathways and whatnot. There's a lot of empty houses and stuff that you've got to go in and search to find materials to stay on top of your game. Most of the time, there's just nothing in these buildings or areas that you've gone down in the pursuit of exploration. Kind of reminds me of Minecraft Dungeons, another game where it's procedurally generated, but these extra corridors and alternate routes through the game ended up giving you nothing, and you just backtracking back out of these areas and corners with nothing, with everything ventured, nothing gained. I hope the second game kind of fixes this to make exploration more worthwhile, because by the end of the game, I just stopped exploring. It wasn't worth it to me. It was boring and just tedious to walk into a building to find fuck all and then leave. There's not much to say about any of the exploration on the ground. It is literally just me bolting from point A to point B, getting to the next story chapter, which is the church. From here, we are on the surface once again, doing the next story plot point. The story plot point will take us to the church, where this woman is entangled in the roots. The roots of this thing, they're corrupted, and that's what's causing all the enemies to be wappy, dappy, and spawny, so we've got to take care of it. We've got to get her out the roots. She is now the root mother, I'm pretty sure was her name, and we start off a standoff. In the standoff, we've got to cover the church while she tries to get out the roots. It's pretty much just survive the timer while it spawns enemies going into the church. Eventually, you'll start spawning the special infected, which is 2 bow guys and a big guy with a sword, which was the boss we just did. So, most sub-bosses you'll find out are just enemies from the area, like enlarged and made more bossy, but generally the same thing. From here, you literally just got to keep yourself covered. Fight Owens, fight. And once the timer ticks down, all the enemies in the area will just die. If you fail, though, you will just die and have to restart. The key thing I want to mention about this, though, is that death doesn't mean as much in this game. Seeming you don't lose anything on death except from progress. It'll just respawn all the enemies. Different enemies, so you might have a more difficult time getting through the world than the last time you died and whatnot. But overall, you don't lose anything. There's no souls, there's no XP loss or anything, which I think benefits this game more than having a big penalty on death, because it makes it just a lot easier and a lot less stressful to try and keep top of everything, because you got all these. You got the ammo, you've got all the other fucking, like, ammo pouches, all the status effect removers, and all this stuff to keep an eye on. I don't really want to have to keep an eye on losing trait points or whatever, because I got jumped or took a random shot from Bufu fucking Egypt. Like, I don't want to lose progress like that in this game, and I'm glad they didn't go with that method of having death mean more than most games, because it still meant a lot. I had to try and traverse the area again and hope it had decent spawns this time than the last time, and so on and so forth. And sometimes there's massive jumps between where the checkpoints are, so it is a detriment to die and have to retravel all of that. So, like, it's not like death doesn't mean anything, it just doesn't mean as much as normal Souls games. Anyway, I digress. Eventually, she fucking gets out, the timer stops, everyone dies, and she will then head back to base, letting us progress forward through the hole in the church. There's also a sniper down at the bottom that I end up kind of toying with, but not really. And then, yeah, we end up back on our journey. From here, we start to get enemies that have weaponry, like ranged weapons, and you start to realize how pointless melee actually is in this game. These guys have AI that lets them run away from me. They know that me getting close and closing the distance is a bad thing, so they'll keep changing and running to cover. So you lose so much health just trying to gain on these guys. Eventually, when you do get to them, you gotta then tank like 4 fucking bullets in front of them, because you're never going to get right in their face without tanking at least 4 bullets. Yeah, melee just isn't very good in this game. I wish it was better, it just isn't, sadly. But I'm still gonna, you know, push through and see what it's like in the second game, I guess. Maybe go guns first and then do melee second, I'm not sure. But yeah, melee is a bit of a difficult boat to try and slide into. When they start getting ranged weaponry and retreating from you and stuff, it is very annoying to try and kill them. I think eventually I'd just say fuck it and use my guns on people that have range and go melee toe-to-toe with people who use melee. But for now, I'm still using melee, and Jesus Christ, these guys running away from me pisses me off. From here, we get into like this more like naturey feeling area that's still in the city. It's one of my favorite looking areas in this game, to be honest. I like the contrast of having like the city roads and like all this like man-made stuff overtaken with like this green roots, mushroom-esque like aesthetic. It's a really nice area. The enemies here are the same ones from the sewers, the goofy guys with the little fucking axes, and they just do their ooga booga dances and start charging at you. They're like the fucking funniest thing ever. I love these enemies. They also have the explodey guys that go and except from that, there's not much else around here. There is the boss enemy that's in this area around here somewhere. I don't remember ever running into him though. He's just like this small black thing that like trots around. But yeah, while speaking about him, let's get to the boss. So, speaking of that little boss, it's the small black guy that is rolling around the area naturally. He has his ads, which are the funny guys with the axes, and that's about all there is to the boss, pretty much. He rolls around. If he rolls into a wall, he'll knock himself back, and it's free damage. It's tons of damage, even. The problem is there's 2 forms of this boss. There's the normal fun one, where it's him and his goons and nothing else. And then there's the bullshit boss fight, which I got, which is him, his goons, and random exploding puffballs of rot that randomly spawn, most of the time, behind you, on top of you, just out of camera's view if you're aiming in with a gun. Why was this chosen as a mechanic? Who knows? No one could answer it. But thankfully, because I'm playing melee, 1, I can see the explosions easier. 2, I don't have to care, I'm playing on normal, so I'm fine. And 3, the guy dies pretty quickly. Second phase is a size change and a move change. But mostly it's still rolling into walls like a doofus and getting killed. Eventually, the madman falls with very little struggles, and we get to move on to do the final boss of Earth, pretty much. There's not much else through this point, it's just more city. And like I said, there's not much difference between the city stuff. It's literally me just running around and going through houses and finding fuck all. So there's not much else to say. Like I said, it just feels same. I didn't really get any extra stuff. No, I couldn't find any extra dungeons or anything. And I did try and explore the whole map, at least on Earth. So it's just straight to the next boss. So there's 1 or 2 things you can get to end Earth on. There is this guy, the giant tree dude that I've never fought before, or a dragon, which I fought before. Thankfully, I got the tree guy because I got to try him out. Sadly, his hitboxes for melee are complete dog shit, and fighting him, his ass. So sadly, he deals damage to you when you stand underneath him. When he just takes a step, he just passively does a lot of damage. So that's not very fun, so you gotta keep timing yourself with his walks and whatnot. Also, he has an AoE, like, fucking explosion thing where he sends out a ripple across the ground with a foot stomp. That is a really cool thing. You have to dodge it with your iframes. I like it when bosses force me to use iframes and stuff and keep me thinking and not just spam dodge to the right or left and hope for the best. Always like it when those things exist. The odds of this boss are the same explodey ones from the first one, which kind of work with the first one. They don't work very well with the second one. I feel like there's way too much going on for me to be timing dodges from the explosions, while timing dodges from his AoEs, timing dodges from his fucking straight line attacks, while under his feet, while getting hit by his feet. There's already enough going on in my boss fight. I don't need to be dodging these guys. I can't just attack them either, because I'm trying to play melee, so that's already a fucking annoyance. So overall, not a fun time on the ad space. Eventually, you'll get him to second phase, and he just loses his legs. And then the hitboxes become absolutely jank. You can only hit his face, from what I could tell. And even then, that's a stretch if you're allowed to hit him there. His moves while he's on the ground aren't very hard to dodge, but for some reason, my brain just lost all fucking momentum in the dodging atmosphere, and I just refused to dodge his attacks correctly and whatnot. But overall, the fight is pretty cool. I like his first phase more than his second phase. Go figure, I guess. There's not much else to say on the guy. He's just a big dude. It would have been much funner if I used guns, I think, but I didn't, so that's on me. He's a cool design, especially in his first phase when you walk in and it's this towering tree guy and he instantly sends a fucking shockwave attack at you. Is a pretty cool thing. Except from that, the guy is, a tree and I've got a sword and sword beats tree, so I win. From here, I go back to see what weapon he gives, and he gives a really cool looking sledgehammer that does more damage with charge attacks or something to that nature. Problem is I don't like the slow weapons in this game. They don't have a lot of range compared to anything that attacks fast like a sword. So I feel like I'm always at a disadvantage. I'm attacking slower with barely any increased range, and most things will just hit me before I hit them. I just feel sluggish and slow. It all around is a bad time, so I only use it for a bit, not very long, and eventually I go back to the sword hand. But for now, we'll try and use this weapon as we start to head towards the next area of the game. First, we've got to go into the Tower of Super Duper Super Secrets that we've been looking for. But before we do any of that, I wanted to try out my hammer against a boss of great nature. This is where I fought the dragon, the other one. I went into adventure mode and quickly tried out the dragon, see how well this hammer went. So to try out the boss weapon, I first went through the adventure mode, which is like just their version of being able to run the game again without having to reset story progress, and I got to fight the dragon this time. The dragon is such a cooler fight in my opinion. Granted, I just run through him with the hammer charge attacks. He doesn't really put up much of a fight, and the ads in this area are immolators, which are much better to deal with in my opinion than the explodey guys when I'm meleeing. But, each to their own, I guess. But yeah, the dragon fight is so much cooler. He has such cool abilities. He looks so much cooler. Just everything about him is just so much better in my opinion. Less annoying ads, cooler moves, more clear moves, better hitboxes, no bullshit, nothing wrong with it. Just pure fucking fights, no bullshit. The hammer itself does decent damage, especially when charged, but like I said, it just feels slow and sluggish, and I'd rather just use the sword over it, so eventually I do switch back, like I said. I don't know what weapon I ended up finishing the game with. We'll have to find out when we get there. But yeah, straight on to the next area. Before we go to the new area, I just wanted to throw out my build that I've currently got going. On the screen, you'll see it at the moment. It is the Thorns, which is melee damage gets deflected, and you get a bit of a barrier. The Sight to increase critical strikes against marked enemies. With the armor just being the generic armor you get at the beginning of the game, increases damage to enemies close to you. I don't remember what the necklace does. I think I swapped between the necklace a lot. Eventually I just stuck with one that gave my melee weapons radiation damage. And then the two rings are joint rings. What they do is they nerf guns by making them have increased recoil and reduced damage to increase your attack speed and your damage on melee weapons. While equipped to both rings, you get increased health, stamina, and something else I don't remember, but that's kind of like the items I use for like the most of the game. The hammer's there currently that I got from the boss, but it won't be there for much longer. It doesn't take long to get swapped out, I don't think, and this is generally the setup I use until I swap to summoners. I go the summoner from, there's like little creatures you can summon, one skull and the guys with the axes. You'll see the skulls in a minute. There I switch to them, and that's kind of like the build I kind of run with melee with the summoners. I never get the traits for those, but hey ho, you live and you learn, I guess. But yeah, that's kind of like the layout we're working with pretty much. Running down the street causes a tower to just randomly appear. Don't know why that happens. Don't even know if the game explains why that happens. Kinda just happens. Inside there's a guy in there that tells you, oh no no no, I can't do anything for you, you must do everything for me, and sends you on your righteous path upon going to many different worlds of many different origins to try and solve what the fuck is going on in this game. Straight through the teleporter brings us towards a woman that is already worshipping us on her knees because we're just that good. She tells us it's been a while since she's seen one of our kind and we need to go solve some shit out. We ask her where the guy is we're looking for and she says, why would I know? And we move on to our merry way into going through Desert Land, the video game. I don't like this area. It's not that I don't like it, that's a harsh word. It's definitely the worst area in this game. It is a slog to get through. The dungeons themselves are meh. It's the biggest meh of this game. After this, it's clean sailing. I like everywhere else. The desert world, just no. Don't want to do it, but at least I got some cool weapons and stuff from it, so I can't really complain that much. It's just, the dungeons are so fucking irritating to navigate. The actual open world area bit is just desert and sometimes it's structures. Woof. Don't go pushing the bridge out too much now, Jesus. We wouldn't want anything interesting to happen here. But yeah, that pretty much boils down to this area. It's just a slog. It's not terrible, it's not great. It's alright, it's just a bit of a slog. But, yeah, that's about it for this area. It's just a bit of a slog. One of the weapons I did get from the side dungeon, however, was the beam gun. This gun's really cool. It's a radiation weapon that just fires in a straight beam. It's not got any, like, attack speed or anything. It's just one straight beam that keeps ticking on damage. It looked like it ticked like 2 damage per bullet, maybe even 3 per bullet from what I could tell and keep up with. I didn't really pay attention to that much, but this is the go-to weapon of our gun category now. Weapons really ain't going to change that much now for gun-wise. Just the actual skills within said guns will change. But now we've pretty much got set up that we'll be using the beam gun. And I think the pistol gets replaced at some point. I just don't know when it does. But the beam gun's going to be our main force of attack, which is going to be needed for the next boss at hand. This is the beginning of the end. This is where bosses just either aren't fun at all, but could be done as melee, which is this one, or they're just not fucking doable melee, which is most of the other ones. And then there's a select few that you could just wail down as melee. Not as many as I thought there was going to be, sadly. But the raise is annoying because it's just all flying mobs that are in the dungeons to begin with that I already hated fighting, but now you put them in an open fucking space where I can't actually hit them easily or correctly. You gotta try and bring them around to the pillars where they can get, like, their AI will duck under to get under the ceiling of the pillars. But, like, it doesn't work half the time, and even when you aim the camera up, it's a 50-50 if your character swings up or just swings forward like an idiot while he gets hit by projectiles being slammed at him by 7 billion skeleton heads. As well as the boss just firing off his fireballs. It gives fire damage so he's not burning. It's, why, man, why? Eventually, I just have to admit defeat. Like, I'm not going to beat this guy melee. I'm going to spend way too much time. I've already put the game on normal to try and, reduce the amount of time I spend trying to get through this game so I can get a video out for, like, the release of the second one and whatnot, so on and so forth, and just so I can enjoy myself for once in one of these videos without wanting to tear my fucking hair out. And here I am, bashing my head against the wall against a boss that is just not made to be defeated by melee. So what did I do? I got the beam gun out, and I just beamed him to death. I didn't give a shit anymore. I just wanted him done, dead, and gone. I kind of came to peace with the fact that this game was just not as melee-friendly as I thought it was going to be. That's fine. Fuck it. We will roll with it. I do not care anymore. This is now where it becomes me just playing the game casually, and no more melee only, because I didn't want to anymore. It just wasn't worth the hassle. So the boss itself, once you switch to guns, becomes a pretty decent endeavor. It's just about dodging and making sure you use the pillars to the best of your advantage as he fires the fireballs, while also dealing with his billions of skeleton ants that he throws at you. There's not much to talk about. He just has a really big weak spot that if you do just constantly hit it, will just cause phase and shifts in his phases really easily, so there's no worries about that. He takes a lot of damage, especially from the beam gun, which you can just constantly hit his weak spot for tons of damage. Eventually, the guy does fall down, and he doesn't give much, except from the fact that he gives the skeleton heads as a reward for getting his soul, or whatever the fuck they want to call these things. And with that, I can now start my summoner build whenever I switch that. As you can see by this point, we switched back to Scrapper Sword, mostly because one, I don't like the slow weapons of the heavy weapons and stuff in this game, but two, because I'm playing on normal, the resources to upgrade these weapons, like the crystals, are so few and far between, and they don't drop very frequently from the enemies that are supposed to drop them. It's just not worth it. You might as well just use a basic weapon until you've got like a chunk of these to upgrade with. So that's what I end up doing, so we just keep the Scrapper Sword for now. After clearing a dungeon out, the final part of it was this guy here who sells a buff for like 60 seconds to increase damage and attack speed or something or other. I can't remember what the buff actually did, but I did buy a handful of them because I thought it was really cool. I thought it was really cool there's just a merchant sat back here. He's like, don't wake the pack don't like people, and if pack goes on you, I must go with pack. Which is, you know, cool. I like it. It's an interesting thing. I end up, like, after buying all my crap from him, I end up sneaking around to make sure I didn't wake the pack up. Because I had no clue if they were, like gonna wake up if I ran past them, or if, like, I ran around them or anything. So I was like, I'll just sneak past to make sure I don't cause any problems. Because this school is pretty cool, and I don't want to end up having to kill him for some reason. So I got my buff and I got left. I didn't want to cause any troubles for the guy. Straight back into the hellhole I call Desert Land, and it's just back to randomly wandering around the desert of all things. So fun to find out where we go next. So I found a side dungeon that had a cool weapon, which kind of annoyed me that on Earth I just didn't find any of these, and even if I might have found them, I didn't do them, and even if I didn't do them, it's probably because they didn't fucking spawn, because I went all around Earth and I barely found anything extra. But in this one, there was a really weird thing where you got scanned by a door, and if you didn't kill anything in a certain amount of time, you started to lose health, and you gained health back by killing things, so you're in this never-ending battle of like trying to fight while trying to stay healed and trying to... It was pretty cool mechanic to have, just to try and get through the dungeon with. Eventually, when you do get to the end, you get scanned by the door again, and the game's like, well done, you made it to the end. Here's a cool item. I got a mace. This is our new melee weapon for a bit because it has a little cool explodey thing on the skull that I don't know why it does that, but it's just really cool. Using the mace as a melee weapon was just really fun overall. Like, it's a really cool weapon. It just looks so fucking cool. It is a skull on a... It's a skull on a, like, bone handle attached to a chain that you just wail around with. It's great. Love it. Slog our way through another dungeon, because this one's part of the main story this time. I found the actual way to go. Huge. We slog our way through another dungeon to lead to the boss fight to find out some very disappointing news. So as soon as you walk into the fight, you see melee isn't going to be a very viable strategy. At least to get the shields down, you need a gun, no matter what. So I gun down the shields, and I'm like, okay, I can then maybe, like, he falls over onto the floor, and it's like, oh, the pain, you've knocked down my shields, and I get some free hits, and we just keep moving and grooving like this. Maybe that's how it plays. It does not. He just stays stood up a bit injured. I tried to melee him, whoomp, straight off the map. GG, well played, guns only, baby. So the main key points of the fight is that you've just got to knock down the shields while dodging his attack and any adds that he summons. Knock down his shields and then hit him in his weak spot when he's able to be hit. And it's just rinse and repeat. Eventually when he respawns, he'll then, when his shield respawns, he'll flip the map around. And then you gotta start again from destroying the shields. But the longer the fight goes on, the more like cover you lose. So you've got to actually start dodging attacks from the ads and him, rather than just taking cover behind whatever's left. Eventually there's just no cover left on the field, and it's just you v the world. Doesn't take too long to beat. He's a pretty cool boss. He looks really cool. He's got all the makings to have like a difficulty spike if you had the difficulty higher, but because my difficulty is low enough that I can just kind of like tank everything and not care as much, he's not that difficult to take down. But on the harder difficulties, I can see this boss giving you a pretty tough time while trying to dodge projectiles, get his shield down, and deal with adds. This is a boss fight that definitely does benefit from having adds in it, as it gives you something, because he doesn't do a lot. There's not much he does do in the fight, so it gives you something to worry about and have a bit of panic and reaction to while you're trying to knock down his shields, and he does his little shitty attacks that don't really seem to do much else other than just to annoy you. The board, like him flipping the arena constantly, like just turning the arena sideways every time, pretty cool. Trying just rotating the board. Yeah, it's a fun fight. Definitely one of the better fights that I've had so far. From all the fights that we've had currently, is definitely one of the highlights so far. The dragon, this, and the tree guy are definitely the highlights. It definitely does seem that a lot of thought and care was put into the actual bosses of the game, and anything that was just an enemy turned up to 11 just feels pretty meh and janky, all things considered. But yeah, this guy's pretty decent. Did enjoy the fight. After that boss fight, we get to the styling, profiling, limousine riding, jet flying, kiss stealing, wheeling and dealing, son of a king. The undying guy over here wants us to go kill a guardian of a swamp and get the heart back to him to progress through the levels and stories of this ever-expanding world. I have to choose this guy because you can choose someone else, and I'll get into that in a second, because he gives I think there's a set of armor and a melee weapon. I think that is better for me. Oh, he gives something. I know he gives a melee weapon, and the melee weapon seems really cool, so I took it. YOLO and whatnot. But I'm going to get into DLC 1 here and explain how much of a bullshit, terrible DLC it is. So the game has 2 DLCs, and I'm going to go into the first one in this section of the game, because this is where the primary effect of the DLC is and takes place, and is utter dog shit. The second one gets its own section because it's its own thing near the end of the game. I'll beat the game first, like I do with everything else, and then go into the DLC. But I'm going to do this one here because of how much of a money waste it is, how much of a money sinkhole it actually turns out to be. So the game is procedurally generated, and this DLC plays heavily on that in good and bad ways. The procedurally generated stuff, good side, goes into the new mode, this new survival mode, where it's kind of like a roguelite game, where kind of like Risk of Rain, the longer you take to clear the levels, the harder it gets later on and stuff, so you want to clear them as fast as possible to get to the high levels as fast as possible, so on and so forth. And as a mode on its own, it stands out as fine as a free update. I definitely don't think I should have paid for this in any way, shape, or form. It's a fine mode, but it's nothing I would write home about or make a statement over. It doesn't seem very polished in my mind, and I had a couple of runs through it, and it's enjoyable for so long. I definitely wouldn't try and go for like the achievement to get all the way through 10 bosses in one sitting or anything. It's kind of not fun enough to do that. The second part of the DLC adds on to the area we're in now, the swamp. This is a actual robbery of money, if you ask me. So what it is it plays on the RNG aspect of the game in a bad way. This new content that, you know, if you were playing the game since launch, you would have already played a lot of this area, running through it to get all the other stuff that you wanted for your builds and whatnot. You now have to run it again, in hopes that the area spawns in. If the area doesn't spawn in, this DLC has no effect on you, and you wouldn't even have known that the DLC was installed. I did not know what the DLC did before I started playing the game. I had to look it up after I beat the game to find out, whoopsies, I just missed it, it didn't spawn for me, and we better rerun. That's not good. That is terrible design for a DLC. You shouldn't, just in no way, shape or form, should never make me pay for something and then have a chance to experience the thing I paid for. That is bullshit fuckery. That is god-awful design. No way, no world, no idea, no developer should put in a game where all the new items and areas are in an area that already exists in the game, and if you don't get it to spawn, fuck you, re-roll the area and try again, hope it doesn't take too long. Like, no, that is fucking daylight robbery. I didn't get it, and I wasn't going back to re-roll the swamp area over and over and over again until I get it to spawn. It's not happening. I just miss out on that part of the DLC. Money not well spent. The second part Or the DLC, the survival, like I said, is fine. I shouldn't have had to pay for that mode. I think it should have been in the game to begin with. It feels like something that should have been there on launch or as a free update. Definitely not paid for. It doesn't feel like it's fleshed out enough to be paid for in any way, shape, or form. But I will take it if they're going to give it to me. I guess I don't have much else to say. The DLC is actually just a robbery disguised as a good thing. I have no clue if the items are any good. I have no clue if the area and the dungeon they add is fucking any good. Also, it adds extra dialogue if you give the item, you give the heart from the defenders to the woman that you have the option to give it to, because you can either give it to the king that I was talking about before, or this woman, like this queen of the swamp. Both of them want the heart. You can keep it for yourself, and that doesn't go down well. You don't get any benefits at all. You can give it to her, and then she gives you stuff. You can give it to him, and he gives you stuff. Because I needed the items from him, I gave it to him. But if you gave it to her, you also got extra dialogue for having this DLC. Fuck knows why, but I didn't get to experience that because the better items for me were on the different character. So overall, I literally experienced 1/3 of this DLC in like its entirety, and even then I would argue that I still got robbed on that 1/3 of DLC I paid for. I don't know, it's terribly designed. I really hope they don't try and pull anything like this again in Remnant 2. The second DLC definitely increased in production and volume, and generally feels better than the base game, I would argue, but we'll get there when we get there. First we've got to get through the swamp. So next on the chopping block is this blob of a boss. So far, I just want to quickly explain. I've been looking at these bosses and the easiest difficulty, how fun were they? And if I played on the hardest, would it be bullshit and like annoying? Or would it actually give a challenge and stuff whenever I was geared and whatnot? Would it be fun trying to dodge all these like heavy hard-hitting abilities and stuff and all these attacks while trying to, you know, survive on the harder difficulties? That's kind of how I've been playing it in my mind. This is one of the bosses that is just so throwaway, it's insane. He runs back and forth and drops blobs on the floor that explode, which if you just stay in the same spot literally doesn't affect you in the slightest. And then his only form of attack while you're at distance is to send a flow of water, which is very choreographed and easy to dodge. And then once you dodge it, you just keep shooting them, and he runs back and forth. He spawns ads, but the ads mean nothing. They're very worthless. They're not very strong ads. And before you know it, the boss fight just kind of ends because he dies because, well, there's not much of a challenge to it. During it melee, you added a bit of a challenge because you had to try and race him back and forth, and if you did stand in his way while he ran, he did do chunks of damage. But if you were playing the game as intended and just using the guns and stuff, you'd have no problem with this guy. It is such a throwaway of a boss that, like, I'm not even going to spend any more time talking about him and just move on to the next section of the game. So I think I got the bosses in the wrong order, but we're going to roll with it because this boss is better. This is, like, 10 times a better boss than the Crackler ever will be, so I'm putting it here. So I can believe that Crackler comes first and the bosses get better as the area goes along, because I really like the swamp area. This fight is like the Butcher, but he's on crack cocaine and is ready to spin to win, and his ads are ready to come show you a thing or two about business. I just really like this boss. He's just a really cool guy. The cramped areas and him destroying his like fucking butcher's nest, if you will, and like his like destroying the walls and stuff as you're trying to find cover, and he's just destroying it. Everything is just so cool about this boss to me that I just really enjoy it. It's probably one of my favorite bosses in this area, because seemingly the other two are, one is meh and the other one requires you to use weaponry of gun proportion, so you have to just kind of give up on that one. But I take it as I can. When a boss is melee friendly and is as fun as this, it makes me really look forward to Remnant 2 and see how they've improved on it. But yeah, the Butcher, or whatever this guy's called, the unclean one or whatever, goes down pretty fun, pretty easily. Like, I say easily a lot. Obviously, I'm playing on the easiest difficulty. I don't have to care. Everything's easy. I bet he hits hard on any other difficulty and is a challenge in of itself. But for me, a Chad like me who plays on the easiest difficulty, bro goes down quick. It's a double bumble boss fight, baby. Double boss fights are probably my favorite type in Souls. They have a chance to be very unique. Two different enemies with two different types of attacks, but all gelling into one coherent unit, so you don't feel like you're being bombarded by two different enemies doing two different things, and you don't really have a chance to combat it. It's generally nice when they do get it right. This one kind of gets it right. It's two of the same-ish enemies. They kind of have different attacks, but not really. And it's just kill one and then kill the other. Once one dies, it gets a buff but doesn't get a heal. So the best way to play it is to just chunk the health bar of one, chunk the health bar of the other, and then kill one while the other one is buffing, kill the other, and you don't have to deal with the buffed up version of one. It's a cheesy way to do it, but it's just a much easier way to do it. Also, I like the idea that if you do plan ahead, you are rewarded for it. It's not just a, oh, you chunked one health bar down, well, here's a full health bar enemy to deal with now. Good luck with that. It's more like, well, if you kind of cycle it properly, you can kill them both without having to deal with the enhanced version of one. I like that. I do like that in my boss fights, when thinking ahead and having a strategy pays off in the long run. It's definitely one of the better dual boss fights. It's fucking miles better than the Godskin duo, and I'm not getting into that. That is a hot loaded barrel for me. But yeah, it's an enjoyable little boss. It's definitely one of the better ones so far. It has its moments. I like the compact of the bridge as well. You're kind of stuck on this small bridge, and you've just got to hope to dear God that you have enough room to keep moving, especially when they both start attacking at the same time. It's a lot of fun. I'll leave it at that. It's a lot of fun for a boss fight. From here, now that we have the heart, straight back to the king to give it to him for reasons I still don't know or remember, so we can get the weapon that I will not be using for this run, even though I said before that it's a really good weapon. I just kind of forget it exists and never use it, so there's that. Also, upgrading it, because it's a boss weapon, is a pain in the ass, so just never use it. From there, it's to the next area, and yeah, this area, it stinks. Now, let me go into why I think this area is just confusing and I don't like it. It's not very good in my eyes. So the whole area itself looks nice. It has some of more of the annoying enemies that I've come across, but overall the area is nice and the enemies aren't too bad. And, you know, the layout is a bit janky, but it still functions. The biggest problem I have with the whole area becomes a puzzle with of itself, because they go on about needing to find these books, and these books have codes, and these codes you shoot bells, and you hit the bells in a certain rotation of the books that they tell you, and you'll find the way through, and you'll find the guy that you're after, which is fine, but you don't have to do any of that, because you just have to get through to the part where you're needed, which is at the, you know, the main boss. And if you don't know the code, you can just fight the boss. If you know this offhand, it's fine, but if you don't, you're just wandering stupidly looking for books and caves to figure out where the fuck you're going. It is so bad, man. I don't know. This could just be me. Again, this area might just be bad for stupid people. I'm a stupid person. That's fine. In my Souls games, I love ambling from point A to point B, killing bosses. I don't like it when they try and make me think. I'm not a thinker, I'm a doer. So, like, maybe this is just because I'm stupid. That's fine, but stupid people exist in the world. I am one of them, and I don't know where, how, or why to get through this area. I was ambling and shambling around in the places I've been already, checking caves to make sure I didn't miss a bells in the fucking books. I did 2 out of the 4 bells, I think there are you can do. I think it's either 2 out of 3 or 2 out of the 4. And I don't know where the other 2 are. I don't care where the other 2 are. I'm not doing them. I just looked it up, because thankfully this game's been out for a while, and I hope Remnant 2 doesn't have a similar thing, because I won't be able to look it up because I'll be playing it on launch. I don't mind puzzles, right? Let's just get this out of the way. Puzzles are fine. Like the Elden Ring, to get one of the bosses, you gotta light the candles and stuff to get the doors to open and whatnot, and those puzzles are fine. But like when the area is like, here's the puzzle, it's find these books, shoot the bells, okay, then act like I don't have to do any of that, but I've got to do it, but I don't have to. When the puzzle becomes a puzzle itself, it's when I have a problem. All right, that's what I'm trying to say. Like when the puzzle becomes a puzzle is when I have a problem. And like I said, the layout is janky, so I don't really know where I'm going at the best of times, but now I'm just completely lost. And then you get more confused, because doing certain things causes things that you were where you were before to have new things happen. Shopkeepers die, and you're just like, okay, but like, what does this have to do with anything? Does this mean now I've got to backtrack further to make sure other things haven't happened? And say, when you have a Souls game and your idea is to give as little information as possible to the player on what they're supposed to be doing and let them figure it out, where to go, what to do, explore, find out, that's fine. But then when you try and make everything so complex and weird, it's just like, where the fuck do I go, what do I do, and how do I do it? I don't know. I might just be dumb, but Jesus Christ, this was a nightmare to navigate. So to the area itself, first boss fight isn't really a boss fight, it is a sit there and survive for as long as possible to continue the main story. It's not optional, I think you have to do this. I don't think it spawns anything different. We did find a spear at some point, but fuck knows where the footage of that is, so... And my ass is not looking through this area for any longer to find out where I got the spear, so you guys can just deal with the fact that we now have a spear and move on from it. You just gotta sit there and survive for as long as possible and kill all the enemies as they spawn in. Yada yada yada. It's just to sit there and survive for as long as possible. Eventually, when you do that, the head honcho of some like clan will start speaking to you. You can ask him questions on where the founder is, and then we move on our merry way. Just as an FYI, this area is a nightmare for melee. Everyone is ranged, running around, taking cover with crossbows, and trying to hit them with melee is a fucking nightmare. So most of the footage you'll just see is me using guns until I come up to a boss, which is, I think the next one is the Warden. So the boss fight itself, I don't know if it would have been good. It didn't seem like it did anything worthwhile, so like I'm going to say it's just a meh boss fight. But Summoner Melee is now in full effect, right? Like, I'm doing damage, and my little boys are doing little jobs. The Summoners themselves don't do chunks of damage, but when you got two smallies, two headies in there, they're going ham. And they're doing work, as well as me throwing my little itty-bitty sticks around, doing big chunks of damage. Bosses just aren't doing much. This guy is hearty, I'm pretty sure, so that means he has more health and resistances. And he still didn't stand much of a chance. All he did was really throw spears. I don't know if he does anything else. I don't know what his moveset is, if he does anything cool or unique. He just kept throwing his fucking weapons. I think he was just lost and confused what to do when the boys showed up and started beating on him. It's a really meh boss fight. It's a cool looking design again. I do like how many weapons the Warden is holding. But he just boils down into a mumbling mess of despair and dies. I completely forgot about this boss while I was doing my editing and whatnot. The root horror exists. I have no clue what it does. It was just a clusterfuck of explosions and death. It died really quickly. So I really have no comment on what it did or what it's good at or anything, because it kind of just existed and then didn't. And this is where I get to the part I was talking about at the beginning. I was lost for a chunk of time, just wandering around trying to figure out where the fuck I'm going and what I'm doing. It takes me a chunk of time, and I mean a chunk of time, to find out where I'm going next and what I should be doing. Eventually I do find this set pathway that I haven't been on before, but it took a while to get here, and it took a lot of backtracking to figure out where the fuck I was going. The Onslaught is next, and it's probably my favorite boss from this area, seeming I skipped one by accident without even realizing it. This boss is pretty simple in what it does, but it does it really well. He keeps you on your toes by teleporting location to location. Every now and again on each teleport, he will summon adds for you to kill. These adds come in the form of just normal running enemies or little flying dragon things that shoot electric balls at you. Generally speaking, this boss isn't anything to write home about, but sometimes simplicity is the best form of boss fights. He's so simple in what he does that it's really cool just to fight him. Just to go mono v mono, not have him do anything overly complicated or anything insane, but instead just keep you on your toes with his teleportation, keep your distance on the lightning strikes, and just go all ham and dodge his attacks on his swings. Bada bing, bada boom. The boss fight is fun, enjoyable, and probably my favorite of the area. Seeming the other one was kind of, a lackluster endeavor of him just throwing his weapons and hoping for the best. This one actually does something. And again, because I skipped the actual main boss of the area by accident, I don't really get to experience anything epic. The actual main bosses of the areas normally seem to be the best variety of boss fights you can get, and I skipped it by accident, so hey ho. So this is the boss fight I'm on about skipping. I didn't realize this was a skip. I thought this is how you had to summon the boss fight, which is why I was confused why it locks you in the room with the guy, and then it's like, figure out the bells, you dipshit, because I had no clue how to do this, and I couldn't get out without quitting the game. I didn't feel like quitting the game, so I just looked it up. The video will be in the description of the guy that I watched do it, because you have to stand in a certain place and shoot from a certain distance that you can see on screen before it will summon. You can't just run around and try and shoot them. There's a certain time frame in between each bell ring before the game goes, no, we are restarting. So you've got to do it in a decent time. So I'll put his video in the description because that's the video I used, and it just deserves a little bit of a shout just for like actually letting me play the game. But this isn't what you need to do actually fight the boss. As you will see, I hope I have it on screen, there's like a little den with an enemy, and if you shoot there, that will summon the boss fight itself. If you don't and you do the bells, you completely skip the fight and you don't have to do anything around it, which is what I did. So hey yo, boss fight down. From here we are on the home stretch. This is pretty much the end of the game. This was the last area before we go to the pinnacle end game zone, where we finally find the actual founder, the old man himself. Don't know how he hasn't aged, as they made it sound like he hadn't been there for years and years, and the guy doesn't look like he's aged a second, but I digress on that. He looks about the same age as his daughter. Don't know how aging works in this area, I guess. But you find him in a cell, open the cell, have a little word with him, give him a little talking to, tell him how he's not Father of the Year this year or any of the other years he's missed, and it's back to Ward 13. Now that we're in Ward 13 and using the special key he gave us, we can wander around the sub-levels and find out exactly where to go from here. You gotta go into this room where there's a computer and a little wall with a mirror on it, which will open a teleportation to the actual ward and island we've been trying to get to this entire fucking time, which was just that close to us apparently, just a mirror teleportation away. Who would have figured? This is where you'll locate the actual like ward we wanted to get to, I think is what it's supposed to be, where some guy is covered in the roots. I think this is supposed to be like where the root is stemming from, and in there is a guy on a fucking hospital bed with like the coolest looking helmet ever, strapped down, ready to go. He is the final boss. So how does this boss stand up to the rest of them? This is one of the rare Souls-like games where the final boss is actually the pinnacle point of the game. Best fight, best arena, best looks, just all around best in the game. His first phase is a bit laughable on difficulty standards, but that again might be because I'm on easy and I could just face tank everything he threw at me, so I didn't have to care. If I was on a harder difficulty, I probably would have had to dip, duck, and dive out of the way of some of his moves, so it would have been a bit more challenging. His second phase, he hams it up and hawks it up and goes Super Saiyan mode and turns into like this fucking like dope ass looking butterfly thing, and this is where the fight gets interesting and becomes a mechanically interesting boss. First off, he takes no damage. You first got to try and wait him out, dodging his moves and waiting for him to send you to the Shadow Realm, and the Shadow Realm is where his ads are going to be, where on all intents and purposes you slowly lose health and have to kill things to either gain ammo or just run straight for the teleporter to teleport back to the boss fight. Once you've done that, then the boss can actually be damaged for a certain extent of time. He has his weak spot and you'll deal tons of damage to that area, and it's rinse and repeat. Wait for him to become immune again, play around with his balls, and then go back to the Shadow Realm to either gain ammo or just straight beeline for the teleporter to fight the boss again. I wish more bosses were like this. Something different, mechanically interesting, something to do, interesting way to implement the ads other than, hey, we have ads in our boss fights. This is a really good way of doing all these things, and I really hope Remnant 2 takes a page from this and goes, look, we understand that all these other bosses compared to this one are just not as good or mechanically interesting as the others, or don't even really have a reason to summon ads other than we need ads. This one takes an interesting spin on things. I do enjoy it, and it is difficult, and even on the easiest difficulty, if I get hit by one of the balls and stagger, all three will hit me and kill me. So it's not even like you can play around with this one. In his second phase, you've got to take him seriously. It's a really cool boss. It's probably one of my favorites in the game. I can't really think of anything that really stumps this one, except maybe the DLC bosses, but we'll get to those. Overall, it is an amazing way to end this game. I think it definitely sends it off on a high note. So the game kind of struggles to get its plot across to me, in a sense. I had to look up what the ending actually meant, because I was really confused. Because if you don't pay attention to the story, you kill the guy who was in a dream sequence, and then the Ward 17 implodes on itself, and you're outside then rowboating away, and then the credits roll, which was like, okay, that happened, I guess. What it's supposed to be saying is, apparently, through what I can gather through some online websites and some people explaining it on Reddit, pretty much that was a dreamer that we killed. A dreamer is a failed experiment to try and travel through different worlds, and vice versa. By failing, they summoned the root in. The root are connected to the dreamers, in essence. So where there's a dreamer, there will be root, and the root summons the mobs and enemies of the game. When you kill him, you finally release him from his subconscious dreams, and he dies, meaning the root is no longer like, there's no source for the root to come through, and that means we can row away safely, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it's alright, I guess, for story-wise. But that means it's on to the DLC. So, DLC time, Subject 2923. To get into this DLC, you have to re-roll the campaign, so any progress made in the actual campaign will be lost. So I recommend, if you're going to do this, just play through the original campaign first, then go through Subject 2923 and finish that. It's supposed to look at the origins of the Dreamers, which I didn't know, because realistically I spent 90% of my time just wandering around a fucking ward trying to solve puzzles. Not a fan of puzzles in this game, I'll tell you. I'll tell you, not a fan. Anyway, it has a cool little opening cutscene, nice art style it goes with, and an actual cutscene. It has more cutscenes than the actual base game ever did, and actually tries to progress a story, which is nice, and show you what is generally happening, which is happy. You start off in like this like farm little area, trying to make your way to the ward. It's a pretty decent area. Nothing really different happens. No new enemies really. It's just a new area of like this like farm area. And it's a pretty big area, to be honest. It takes a while to traverse it all. And there's not much in between any of the areas. It kind of reminds me of Earth or Ron, to be honest. Just a desert area. A lot of open space. At least there's actually stuff to look at in this one, unlike the desert area. It's generally more of a nicer on the eyes aesthetic. But it does remind me of like the beginning of the game on Earth, just kind of like moping around trying to find anything worthwhile in these open spaces and barnyards and stuff. But there's not really anything there, or really anything different that happens. The biggest thing I can say is that I picked up an SMG at some point from the ward, so big ups on that one. But I can't really edit it and show you and explain it to you, because like I said, it took me so long to do it, and I did it in a backwards way to what the guide says, that I don't think I'd be able to show you anything coherently without it being a jumpy jump cut mess, and I don't really want that. So I leave the instructions were on the screen a minute ago. They should be gone now, but those were the rules of getting this all done. Ward Prime is probably the worst part of the DLC. It kind of kills the pacing of the game, because you go from killing all the enemies and moving quickly through this open landscape of the farms and stuff to Ward Prime. Once you get into Ward Prime, it instantly slows down into this like fetch quest, puzzle quest of madness, badness, and tadness, and you just don't want to do it anymore. If it didn't take so long, or it was a quick like either do one of the like 4 or 5 key things you have to do to get the actual fucking meat and bones of the DLC moving, then it wouldn't be so bad. But the fact that you gotta go get the maintenance key, you use the maintenance key to get the key card, you use the key card to get the fuse, you use the fuse to open up the homestead base, and use the homestead base to unlock the fucking storage room to get the machine pistol, and then you can actually open up the fucking blast doors. It's like, whatever. I don't want to do all of that. Like 1 or 2 of them wouldn't be too bad, but the fact that you've got to enter the root world, do this, get teleported back to where you started in the root world, to then make your way back to the place you just were at in the root, it takes so much time. It's not worth the fucking hassle, honestly. Just use the guide and speedrun it as fast as you possibly can, because this part of the DLC is not fun in the slightest. But the next part is real fun. And then you make it to the ward. Sweet Bippy the ward. This is where the main puzzle part of the game is before the actual DLC starts and gives you something cool and unique and new. And Jesus Christ, is this just a nightmare to navigate. It's just full of puzzles, but the problem is the biggest puzzle piece of this area is this weird mechanic of going into like this subspace. You'll see them walking around while you're like moving around the world and stuff in the normal world. There's like these outlines of enemies and stuff, and when you go into like this subspace through this like object you can interact with, you then go into their world and you can interact with stuff that you can't interact with in your world. But as soon as you interact with something, it takes you out, so then you have to go back in it to then reactivate the things you want to do. For example, this becomes a pain in the ass where there's an area that you need to destroy 3 of these things to get the pumps working again, but every time you kill one of the things in their world, you get sent back to your world, so then you gotta go back in, run all the way back over to the fucking pumps, destroy the other pump, hope you don't get one shot by the I-beams on the way there, then destroy it, get sent back to your world, get back into their world, run over to the pumps, destroy the last one, go back to your world, activate it again because there's other things to do. It's just let me stay in that world, man. It's so mind-blowing. And you don't know what you want to be doing or where you're going. It's all just another big guessing game on the puzzle front. I had to look it up eventually, but I can't really edit it and show you and explain it to you because, like I said, it took me so long to do it, and I did it in a backwards way to what the guide says, that I don't think I'd be able to show you anything coherently without it being a jumpy, jump cut mess, and I don't really want that. So the instructions were on the screen a minute ago. They should be gone now, but those were the rules of getting this all done. Ward Prime is probably the worst part of the DLC. It kind of kills the pacing of the game because you go from killing all the enemies and moving quickly through this open landscape of the farms and stuff to Ward Prime. Once you get into Ward Prime, it instantly slows down into this like fetch quest, puzzle quest of madness, badness, and tadness, and you just don't want to do it anymore. If it didn't take so long, or it was a quick like either do one of the like 4 or 5 key things you have to do to get the actual fucking meat and bones of the DLC moving, then it wouldn't be so bad. But the fact that you gotta go get the maintenance key, you use the maintenance key to get the key card, you use the key card to get the fuse, you use the fuse to open up the homestead base, and you use the homestead base to unlock the fucking storage room to get the machine pistol, and then you can actually open up the fucking blast doors. It's like, whatever. I don't want to do all of that. Like 1 or 2 of them wouldn't be too bad, but the fact that you've got to enter the root world, do this, get teleported back to where you started in the root world, to then make your way back to the place you just were at in the root, it takes so much time. It's not worth the fucking hassle, honestly. Just use the guide and speedrun it as fast as you possibly can, because this part of the DLC is not fun in the slightest, but the next part is real fun. Now that the blast doors have opened and you can actually enter the nitty gritty, the cool part of the DLC, the snow area that was like advertised in the pictures and whatnot, with all the snowy mountains, the new enemies and bosses, and this random woman who can dispel the root. Story-wise, no clue what's going on. I had struggle keeping up in the main campaign. I checked out as soon as the rowboat left the island of the main campaign. No fucking clue story-wise what's going on here. The most I could tell you is that the woman can dispel the root, and I'm pretty sure we're trying to get her to bring her back to the Earth so that she can save Earth. I think is what we're trying to do. I couldn't tell you, honestly. The actual world itself and the area is decent. I don't really have a single complaint about the main part of the DLC, of like the actual combat areas of the DLC is what I'll say. Ward Prime sucks dick, but the farm area leading into Ward Prime and the tundra, like snow areas after Ward Prime, all perfectly fun stuff. Enjoy all of it. Super good stuff. Bosses, pretty cool. All fun stuff. We'll get into the bosses in a second, but first we gotta get through the areas. The areas themselves, like, they're all somewhat same. If you like really think about it, all the areas somewhat pave and path the same way. This one doesn't really feel much different to like any of the other areas, doesn't do anything special. The area itself looks nice, and there's some cool characters, like there's a giant that you find later on and stuff. Overall, it's a cool environment, but nothing too different or wacky to what we've seen in the base game, which is fine. It doesn't have to be different, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. But yeah, for the most part, area-wise, pretty cool, pretty chill. So, let's get to the bosses. There's not much run between the bosses, and the areas don't have anything important in them, really. Also, we're an hour 10 into this video, so I should probably get a move on actually finishing this up, because we don't want to be here forever. The first boss on the chopping block for us was the Ice Conjurer. He was really cool. He was deadly even on the easiest difficulty. He hit like a truck, and he put a bit of a roadblock in the idea that he summoned ice. He was the Ice Conjurer. He would summon like an orb in the sky that you'd have to shoot down. If not, you would just get ass blasted with ice and just die pretty much. It was like a very not ignorable situation to be in. So like, it was a cool boss. I definitely would have liked to play against it on a harder difficulty. The DLC definitely shows me that a harder difficulty would have been much funner in the DLC, because these bosses were cool, interesting, unique. I hope there's more bosses like this in the second one than there was in the base game, because these bosses, like I say, sometimes the shorter experience brings out the better content. This is a short burst of fun content. Every boss in this DLC I absolutely 100% enjoyed, more than most bosses I fought in the base game. This guy being one of them. The next boss, and he gives me such cool weapons as well, the next boss. It's an overall fun experience. Really enjoyed this guy. He was really fun. This DLC, and this boss in particular, shows me that the base game was quantity over quality, and the DLC was quality over quantity, because the DLC is a short burst of content. If you don't get stuck in Lord Prime, it is a real short burst of quality stuff. This boss fight knocks it out of the park as another double boss fight, and to be honest, it's probably one of my favorite double boss fights I've played in the Souls game so far. It's not like unique in any way, shape or form. Like, it doesn't like break down the doors. It's not like the Dark Souls 3 DLC double boss fight, which really is a quality double boss. But like, it's still really fucking good and a lot of fun to fight. If like I've been saying for this video, if I played on the harder difficulties, it would have been a challenge, a slugfest, and it would have been fucking beautiful to play. But I played on the easier difficulty, so I gotta, judge it at that. And even then, boss fight still goes hard. He killed me a couple of times. He does hit hard. He can catch you out. He will let you know who's boss. But it really does go to show that, like, when this company focuses on quantity over quality, they really shot themselves in the foot with the base game. And I'm hoping number 2 has more of that quality over quantity mindset, and instead of focusing on this randomly generated world and constantly being able to replay it with meh bosses and okay bosses and stuff, we get more of like, well, there's less replayability on the constantly running through the game, but the bosses are more enjoyable, they're more fun, they're better, they hit harder, they're bigger, they're more intuitive, there's more gimmicks around them, they do more things. Like, this DLC really hits home to me that number 2 has such potential to be a quality game. But yeah, this boss is just fun, is like the best way to put it. He does give you his chainsaw, which is heavy attack, sends the chain forward and pulls enemy towards you. Pretty cool stuff. Not much else to talk about over than that. So, to the next boss it is. Now, the next boss, sadly, I didn't really get to see how it worked and how it functioned, because I switched to the claws. These claws have a unique gimmick of heavy attacks apply bleed. So the idea is you apply the free stack bleed on someone and then just start wailing on them. The boss fight does have a bit of a cop-out thing where it's like, it tries to bait you in, is a better word, I guess. It has like a bait where it shows you like this flippy rat with throwing knives and stuff, and then the warden jumps down and squashes him with his dual shields. This is by far the worst boss of the DLC, but not because it's bad in any way, it's just the least memorable of all of them. It's still a decent fight, it still throws its punches. Sadly, I didn't really get to see what it do again, like I said, because of the claws just absolutely wrecked him, so he didn't really do much or do anything. Kind of just got wrecked and we moved on. There's not much after this now. It is literally home stretch after this boss and then to the final boss, so let's go see what's going on past old Warden Boy. Back to the plot, I still don't understand, but I'm really trying for you guys. Pretty much from what I could gather, the Root is trying to seep in. She's from Earth, but she doesn't really remember it that much, but she can stop the Root. The Root keeps attacking the Guardian of this land, and she finally comes to the realization that to stop the Root from attacking this land, she needs to go back to Earth and help us stop the Root, just so that she has a chance to live peacefully where she is, I think, is the idea we run with. She says goodbye to a little, well, I say little, he's ginormous guy that she befriended, and she comes with us to start the final boss. The final boss is a bit weird. I failed it the first time round, and then I didn't understand how to get back in it. This one I think is generally just 100% my fault, but you have to then run back to the breach to activate it so that you can go to the other universe, like, world, and then you can start the boss. If you don't, the teleporter takes you back to the normal base DLC, which is just weird. I don't know why they decided it did that, but to the final boss. And once a motherfucking again, the final boss of the DLC is by far the best boss in the game. I would say it's better than the one in the base game, but I feel that's on personal preference. I feel like they are both really good boss fights in any stretch of the imagination. I don't think you can make an argument for them being bad bosses. They are definitely the best this game has to offer. I prefer this one just because of the first phase is a little bit more challenging than the one in the base game, and the second phase just goes balls to the wall, nutty bullet hell mode. The first phase, he's just like this weird tentacle monster with like Azure Wrath arms fucking sticking out of them in like astral form. Really weird looking stuff, but it's really cool to look at the same time. Like I said, claws, bleed, whack him a bunch, he goes down. Not very hard, but not very easy either. He did put up a bit of a fight, put up a bit of a throwdown for me, didn't make it too easy. Second phase is where guns have to be used, but it has its own gun. It gives you a certain gun to use, which is perfectly fine and fair. Don't mind it when fights do that. The gun they give you is just like this minigun thing that the longer you hold down the trigger, the more you shoot with it, the more stacks you get on its like ability. It passively increases the attack speed until it is literally like a minigun, and then when you fire your ability, you fire like a big chunk of damage all at once, but then have to restack the ability to get your attack speed back up. It's a cool fucking weapon. It looks dope as well. Second phase goes insane Mado mode, where it becomes a bullet hell of dodging projectiles and clearing the screen and stuff. Real fun stuff. Second half of this fight really makes it for me. The DLC ends on the highest note this DLC could have ended on. The game ends on the highest note it could have ended on for the boss fight wise. Story wise, the end cutscene, I don't fucking understand what's going on still. From what I can gather, we just stop the Root in this area now as well, I think. The guy says you can't completely stop the Root, it's forever coming, forever growing, you will not be stopped. No clue how true that statement is, but like I think the general idea is that we've cleared out another Dreamer, so the Root in that area will all slowly but steadily die off. You go back to Ward 13 and celebrations ensue, and then the cutscene kind of just ends and the title card rolls and credits start, and then that is the whole experience you can technically have with Remnant from the Ashes. So the last little thing I'll mention about Remnant before we go through to the final verdict and stuff is the survival mode that the game did implement in its first DLC that I mentioned near the beginning of the video. That was over an hour ago at this point, and I didn't really elaborate on it, so here it is. What it is just a roguelike kind of system where you start with nothing but like a pistol and a couple of scrap, and you can buy some stuff at the beginning, and then you go through just the generic normal levels you've been playing through the base game with, and you can find traits. Instead of leveling up, you just find the traits on the floor, and you fight armor in boxes and stuff, and weapons laying around on the boxes and whatnot. All that general gist stuff of a roguelike exists, and then you kill the boss, and then it sends you back to like the central zone to spend all the scrap you found during your run, as well as everything else in between. And then you go back out. The longer you take to clear the levels, the more difficult it gets, yada yada yada. The more enemies you kill, the more XP you get, yada yada yada. Pretty simple stuff. Like I said, I shouldn't have had to pay for it, but what I did pay for, I'm all right with. I wouldn't write home about it. So yeah, that's the survival mode. Let's just get to the general thoughts and opinions and the special thing at the end. So that is Remnant from the Ashes. That is everything that you can possibly do in it. Adventure mode was briefly touched. Survival mode was briefly touched. The base game was beat. I didn't get majority of the stuff from the first DLC found in the area, and I'm not re-rolling it to find it. The second DLC was completely beat. And I've got to say, I enjoyed myself. Did I get into it as much as I wanted to? No. I couldn't really get behind the whole procedurally generated try and find the traits that you want. I really wanted to do the summoner build, seeing that those traits existed in the survival mode, but trying to find them out in the open world and get to the quests and dungeons that hold them and stuff is not something I really feel like doing. It doesn't really strike me as enjoyable just rolling the same map over and over again to try and get these traits to make my build work. Normally I'm okay with it, but it's just I'm not really feeling it with this one. I don't feel like there's enough replayability for me personally to want to go do these things and get these things unlocked. But like just playing the game once like a normal Souls game, I perfectly enjoyed myself. I had a perfectly good time. I couldn't ask for anything more. I think the game does well at what it wants to do. If you do like that grindy aspect of re-rolling your worlds and stuff, you will enjoy yourself more than I would have done if I tried to do those things. But just getting a general build going and stuff is perfectly fine as well. If you want to focus more on the gunplay and not the wacky shit I wanted to do, you're generally going to have a fun time. I can't really say that the game is bad in any way. It has its jank and its personality. It definitely hasn't aged as well as I thought it was going to. It only came out recently, don't get me wrong. It's not like an old game. It's still of this generation per se, but like it still has a bit of jank and a bit of rough edges around it that I think the second game is going to edge out and iron over and stuff. But overall, like, I perfectly enjoyed my experience. It's probably one of the more fun of non-FromSoft Souls games I've played in a while. In a hot minute even. God damn it, phone. But there's something special I wanted to do. I'm going to start doing for every Souls game. I'm going to play back through the FromSoft games to put them on here. Let's do a little bit of a list. Welcome to the tier list maker. I thought it'd be a fun idea, and it also gives me a reason to play games that I just don't really have an idea for a video other than in the adventure, to give them a reason to exist on the channel so they can be ranked on the board. At the end of every video, Souls related video at least, we'll have them ranked on the board. That is just the plan at hand. I've put as many as I could think of currently, so this list will expand as we play more games and more come out and I find more gems, if you will. So far we'll have Lords of the Fallen and Remnant from the Ashes to put on there. I could technically swing with Elden Ring because I've done 2 videos, but I've never done a proper playthrough on the channel as like a little adventure video. So that would probably be the next thing on the chopping block after all the new stuff is out, is to go back through the FromSoft games. Bloodborne's not on here, it should have been though. I've nearly done that. I'm literally just stuck on costs and then that video is coming out. So, without further ado, let's start ranking these. So, first things first, Lords of the Fallen has to be D tier. I'm sorry to any Lords of the Fallen fans that may be hurt by this one. The game's not very good. Like, it's the best way to put it. The game is just not very solid. It has good ideas, it has some good boss fights, but overall, the areas stink, the weaponry stinks, the fucking combat and clunkiness stinks. Some of the systems are cool ideas executed poorly. Overall stinker. But you know, I enjoyed myself at least. It's still enjoyable, but it's definitely a D. Next up was Remnant from the Ashes. Now, I was thinking about this one long and hard. It's definitely not D tier. It doesn't stink. It's not terrible. It's not C tier. It's definitely above that, but it's not A. It's gotta go in B tier. It's definitely down the middle of the road kind of game. Doesn't do anything to make itself well known. The stinker of the DLC nearly knocks it down to C, trying to charge people for literally what I would consider daylight robbery. But I look past that because the second DLC really knocked it out of the park. If they had 2 of those DLCs, it probably would have hit an A tier, just because it's only one of those DLCs. Only one DLC really knocks it out of the park in quality wise, and even then Prime Ward ruins it to a degree. It's gonna have to be middle of the road. So that's where we stand on the tier list so far. Can't wait to start playing through some of these. Armored Car comes out next month, so that should be fun. I think Liza P, comes out next month. Code Vein's already done. I've beaten that for the channel. Just need to edit and upload it. Bleak Faith will probably be the next one because I'm trying to speedrun that game. So there's that. Weird RPG we're making moves on. Everything else is not touched. So Remnant 2 will probably be the next one that hits the board because that comes out in like a few days. Diablo will probably be the next video, maybe? No, I think Remnant will be the next video, then Diablo, and then it's just fucking a who's who of what comes next after that. So thank you guys for watching. I hope this is more interesting with the board and stuff now. Just a little bit of fun to be had along the way, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.